What's up, everybody? Today's video, we got two sells for you, two running backs, one from me and one from Hammer. But let's get right to it. Before we do that, guys, do us a favor, smash that like, smash that subscribe if you're new. But let's go. Hammer, what do we got here for your running back that you are selling?
This might be an unpopular sell with a lot of people, but for me, I have Jonathan Taylor, running back, Indianapolis Colts. And while I'm not saying that you should sell him no matter what, if I have him, especially, your intro kind of stated it perfectly, two running backs, right? Fairly young running backs, right? Jonathan Taylor is currently 24. And that's because I think the running back position, and it's unfortunate, has been devalued. And even in fantasy, we look at it from a shelf life perspective. So Jonathan Taylor already has 3 seasons under his belt, and he has a total of roughly 600 carries, close to 700 carries. So in 3 years, he has 700 carries. Now, that Indianapolis Colts offense has basically devolved as Jonathan Taylor's gotten better. So there's more pressure on him to be that entire offense. Now, I'm not saying Jonathan Taylor still won't be effective. I'm not saying Jonathan Taylor still won't be able to be an RB1 on your particular team. However, from the running back position, in terms of a ceiling, we've probably seen Jonathan Taylor's ceiling. Now, like I said, I know he's still a young running back, but I think these running backs tend to fall off fairly quickly. It's going to be really hard for these guys to get that second contract. And there's a lot of uncertainty with that second contract, even if you're a phenomenal talent like a Josh Jacobs, who's been extremely productive, like a Jonathan Taylor, who I'm currently talking about. I could throw Saquon Barkley into that mix as well in terms of these running backs and the uncertainty with their contracts. So it definitely provides a lot of fodder for, let me see who's out there. He's still obviously a very big name. I think you could fetch a good haul for him, especially if you are a rebuilding team. And I think you'll be able to gain a lot of assets from him, of top level production. And then, obviously, what is the contract going to look like? Where is he going to play? What offense is he going to be at? All those variables affect these values, especially at the running back position. So Jonathan Taylor, I would like to sell. Now, the caveat for my sell on Jonathan Taylor is sell him for the right price. There may be a team out there that in week 6, in week 7, approaching your trading deadline, might need a running back that may take them over the top. Now, that might be a contending team, so you'd probably want multiple first-round picks from that particular team, or first-round pick plus, a really good young, probably ascending player. I think Jonathan Taylor will really fetch you some really good value if you are a rebuilding team and you have this big name running back with a relatively short shelf life.
He is valued kind of in the range of a Devonta Smith, Tyreek Hill, T. Higgins, Drake London, JSN, Andrews, Metcalf, RB3 on Keep Trade Cut. He's my Dynasty RB3 as well. He is valuable. I actually think I want to buy him almost in this situation because of just the kind of perception with Anthony Richardson there, and the perception that Anthony Richardson is going to take away a lot and is going to take away a lot of touchdowns down at the goal line. And maybe they're not as good, so maybe there's not as many goal line opportunities. And of course, on top of that, A-Rich might take some away. So I get all that. So I feel like, he might be more available than he probably should be in some leagues. So, I definitely inquire about him if you have the assets to maybe try and go get him. But I'm okay with, he's a running back, so I'm definitely okay with selling him. So I'm all on board on that. So yeah, I mean, give me Devonta Smith, T. Higgins, give me Jerry Judy plus. I'd probably prefer Devonta Smith or T. Higgins. Oh, well, I do prefer Devonta Smith or T. Higgins
I would as
above
well.
Jerry Judy.
But I think the key, I think the key with Jonathan Taylor, especially if you're on the selling end of Jonathan Taylor, is something that I mentioned before, which is the absolute key, is the timing of your sell. right?
Mhm.
Especially going into the season where teams, especially a team that's kind of contending and looking to go over the top, sometimes those teams may be willing to pay more than they would at this particular point when, as you said, no points are being scored. There's, every team is, 0-0. So you got to take all those things into account. And, not only the people that you're trading are important or the players you're trading is important, but the timing of trades kind of can make or break a really good deal for you, especially if you're trading away, a top name or a top running back. As you said, he's RB3 in keep trade cut, and he's your dynasty RB3. So I think that's very important too, is the timing of your trade can kind of get you maximize your value is probably the best way to put it.
All right, moving on to my sell. I've got Josh Jacobs coming off the 2,000-yard season. Jimmy G offense might not be as good. Offense might not have as many opportunities in the red zone. And I think more importantly is that he's on the tag. Like, and if this team is not good and they're, 2, 3, 4 wins going into the later weeks of the season, does he continue to play and risk injury at that point? So that's something that was crossing my mind, um, thinking about Josh Jacobs, because that team is not going to be very good. At least we don't think they are going to be. We'll see, obviously, but so I don't like it for this year. And then, of course, what's going to happen next year and going forward? Does he get a contract? What team does he go to? I do think the 2,000-yard season was one of those ceilings, kind of like when Debo had his huge wide receiver season, 2 years back. So I feel like Jacobs is being valued very, very high right now. And, like you felt with JT, I just feel like, come off of Jacobs now while he has the value, while the team isn't good and people think he's just going to get the ball shoved down his throat, which he probably will. But again, what's going to happen when you really need him at the end of the season? Is he going to be playing in those games? I think that's a legit thing to think about. But what do you think, Hammer?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I have Josh Jacobs in our home league, and it's something that I've been wrestling with basically since the end of the season. He was far and away the most surprising player, I think, of this particular season, where we kind of all view Josh Jacobs as basically a high end RB2 going into, last season. And we were like, okay, he has high end RB2, low end RB1 potential. And then all of a sudden, there were games where you were just looking at it like, all right, Josh Jacobs got 20. Josh Jacobs got 25 points. He had that massive game against, I believe it was Seattle, where he had like 50 something points. So he was really piling it up. And that team, last year wasn't very good. Now, obviously, he was playing for a contract. So he was going out of his mind. There were games where he got banged up in the game and then came back when you thought,
Mhm.
all right, this guy's not coming back in this game. So I think the point that you bring up is really interesting and of an extremely legitimate point where now that he's on the tag, like, what is the motivation, right? If I feel a little nick or I feel a little bang or a little tweak, a little something, what's my motivation to get franchise tagged
Mhm.
again at that position? So
And it's
it's
funny.
very interesting.
It's interesting that you say that because apparently, I don't know if you heard, Austin Eckler apparently had a Zoom meeting with about 10 running backs. Josh Jacobs was one of them, if I'm not mistaken. And they did talk about, if you do get an injury, to sit out and stuff like that. That was something that was being talked about throughout them to kind of come back at their team in a way or whatever
It's a
it
little bit
was.
of
But
leverage. It's a source of leverage that they
A
have, right?
and
Because
and that's another point why I bring up that Josh Jacobs thing, because, again, at the end of the season, why is he gonna risk himself getting injured and putting more miles on if his team has no chance to win? So
yeah, super interesting point, and I think that's something that, like I said, personally, I wrestle with because I have him on a dynasty team, and he was so good for me last year. And I, the one thing I'm struggling with is what is his true value. You know what I mean?
oh,
Because a lot of people are looking at it where it's like, all right, Josh Jacobs was always pretty good to really good, but he was never elite. he was elite last year from a fantasy standpoint.
He's RB10 on Keep Trade Cut. He's worth about an early first, mid first, in the same range as Kenny Walker, ETN, Chubb. But now, can you sell Josh Jacobs? Maybe you try and get a QB that's been kind of down lately, that has had not as much value in the dynasty community, like a Tua or like a Kyler Murray. Can you try and come off of Josh Jacobs and come up with some kind of package, get yourself a QB? Or do you come off and get yourself a wide receiver? Jerry Judy's kind of right in that range, right? Brandon Ayuk plus, Christian Watson plus, right? Jordan Addison plus, Quentin Johnston plus. Like, depending what you need on your team and what your situation is, these are just some guys you could think about, moving off of. Calvin Ridley. So you got a bunch of options with Josh Jacobs, with his value right now. So, take advantage while you can. Do you wait until the season until he does have a big game? Do you take that risk, or do you sell him now? So, shop around, see what you can get for him, and if it's good enough, I'm okay with coming off.
That's the one thing I think Josh Jacobs is one of those rare, not rare per se, but one of those really, really interesting cases, because it's like, what do? He's going to get, obviously, I don't think he's going to hold out into the season. He might a game or two, depending on what, how everything shakes out. Those things are really hard to predict, but he's going to get elite level usage when he's in there. The Raiders don't really have anybody on that roster from the running back position to kind of threaten his carry. So he's going to get elite level usage. I think that, what you said was just nail on the head type stuff in terms of, down the stretch, week 13, they're, 2-9, 2-10, some nonsense like that, 3 and whatever. And does he have a hamstring tweak or some weird thing where he pops up on the injury report and he's just out? So it's a very fickle thing with Josh Jacobs. So that was a really good, a really good person to bring up in terms of selling, because there's so much uncertainty with the contract, with all the other factors involved. And I think he's a really good football player. And it's a shame that this situation with the running backs has kind of devolved into, how we have to kind of treat them in relation to fantasy from what they're going through in real life.
Shit, can I tear down to Javonte plus? If I'm in contention, can I get a Derrick Henry plus?
I wonder, because Derrick Henry is another interesting case, and he could have been an easy, one of these sell candidates, because while he's a little bit older at the running back position, but he does have the miles, but he doesn't have as many years. Right? I think he didn't really bust out until basically year 3-ish, somewhere in that range, year 4-ish, because he was running behind DeMarco Murray for a significant amount of time. So Derrick Henry is really one of those outliers in terms of age and how we look at running backs age-wise, because, like I said, Josh Jacobs is 25. Jonathan Taylor's 24. And Derrick Henry is the true definition of a late bloomer, but he's in a similar situation where we don't think Tennessee is going to be very good. They're kind of dependent on him as being the whole offense. There's not a lot of skill at the quarterback position, in Tennessee, as well as the wide receiver position. There's a lot of uncertainty there as well. So I don't know if I would get rid of Josh Jacobs and want to bring in Derrick Henry.
Miles Sanders, Joe Mixon.
Miles Sanders would be interesting. Yeah, I think Miles Sanders would be I would be okay with, because he has the contract. He's going to be there. Miles Sanders is a pretty good running back. So, and we know he's going to get some good volume with that Carolina situation. So Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders, I'd be a little more comfortable with from a dynasty perspective than I would be with Derrick Henry. Yeah, if I'm giving up, a value in Josh Jacobs.
All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for this video. Let us know what you think down in the comments about these two guys. Are you selling them? Let us know, Hammer. Let them know what to do.
Smash, like, subscribe.
We out of here. We'll see y'all in the next one.